back at you. Welcome to the Arctic Hope podcast, the Fresh Hope podcast. You are in the Arctic Hope Igloo, and I'm so happy that you're here. So happy that you get to join me today. I knew you'd be here. I knew that you'd be here with me this afternoon, this Friday, March the 1st. Congratulations, you've made it through 3 months of 2019 so far, and I'm excited. Like this is fantastic. That's a new word. It's a new word for all you kids out there. Don't believe that teachers tell you it's not real. It's real. Fantastic is a word. It's a fantastic time to be alive. It's a fantastic time to be in Canada. Ottawa today is it's colder. It's about minus. Like last I checked, I think it was about minus 15, and it's not terribly cold. It's not terribly warm, but I don't know. Next week, so next Monday, Sunday, I fly to Winnipeg, and then Monday up to Whale Cove. Tuesday to Baker Lake. Both of these communities, for many of you who might not know, are in Nunavut. Last year, we myself and Braden Scharfenberg, we started out on this 25 Nunavut community tour. And we were talking about hope and talking about how in our lives, how God has really changed the bad things that were going on in our lives, the things that we're really struggling with. And in my own personal life, I'd gone through something pretty traumatic when I was a teenager at 16 years old, and it forever changed how things were going in my life, or at least at that point in time. Not forever. Life is amazing now, but then it was really quite a mess. And so we talk about hope and how God in His love for us has changed our lives. And the other guy that I traveled with, Braden, he also went through something similar that I'd gone through, and as a byproduct, he was really depressed and quite unsure of how long he'd be alive, and so in both of our cases, I mean, our two stories are, if I can say this, our two stories are some of my favorite stories to tell, because it is so real for us. It's so, at that point in time, life was crazy, but God got a hold of our lives, and things were forever changed after God intervened, and so we this whole 21 community tour last year. We started out in February, went to Iqaluit, Cape Dorset, and in Kimmirut, and then it was every community, every month after that, we were just traveling to different regions and different communities. We made it to 21 communities across Nunavut last year we made it to. That type of tour, that type of initiative, I don't think has ever been attempted before. I've gone on record, previously and said that I know I'm almost certain that it's never happened before, and I still am almost 100% certain, but I think there might have been a couple, different government tours and that, but never the case where people were talking about hope, where they were talking about how God has really moved in our lives. And, like that is something that's unique. That's something that is hard to really quantify. Shout out to all of our partners, all of the agencies and churches and Canadians that support the Arctic Hope Project, support the Bill Prankett Evangelistic Association, because all of the travels we did last year, it was all made possible because of our sponsors, because of our partners. And we use the word partners because they are people who support. They are people who pray for, who send us their love. But it's a partnership, and I can honestly tell you, I would not be here, that Becky wouldn't be here, my wife Becky, that Bill and Gwen Prankard would not be here if it wasn't for our dear partners. And so shout out to every one of you who support, who pray for, who love on the Bill Prankett Evangelistic Association and the Arctic Hope Project. Like that, they are some of the best people in this country. Very generous, very supportive. They encourage me. sometimes, and just traveling with Bill and different meetings and such, I get to meet some of these partners. And anyway, it's always such a treat to meet them and shake their hands and love on them, give them a hug, and it feels like you find distant relatives sometimes. But Braid and I, we went on this whole tour last year, and so we made it to 21, and about halfway through the year, we were traveling. I think it was in the western region of Nunavut. It's a region called Kitimut, and there's, I think, about 5 or 6, maybe 7 communities up in that region. Traveling from Ottawa, it takes 2 days. You have to fly to Edmonton, and then you overnight Edmonton, then you fly first thing in the morning out of Edmonton up to Yellowknife, and then Yellowknife to the communities up there. And by the time you finally get to the communities you need to be going to, like 2 days are gone. And they're right at the very top of Canada. And the beautiful people up there, beautiful communities. I mean, Canada is just a beautiful country. It is a phenomenal country. And so we made it to 2021, and it was when we hit the Kitimut region in the summer of 2018. The two of us really felt like we were campaigning, like almost like we were politicians. Like I think about what a politician might do sometimes. Never been a politician, but I think about what they might do. And I think they do a lot of traveling, talking to community members in community centers or at gymnasiums or wherever. And that's what we were doing. We were holding community events, sometimes in churches, sometimes in high schools, but most of the time it was in a community center. And Braden would, he's a singer and songwriter, worship leader at a church in Calgary called First Assembly. And so, he's been one of my closest friends now for almost 10 years. And the other thing, so we're traveling and we're talking about hope and how God has impacted our lives as a means of inspiring hope in the lives of the people who would come out to our meeting. And we would try and incentivize people to come out, and we'd give out like electronics and sometimes headphones, and we would just put it on the community Facebook groups, and we'd say, look, we're holding a meeting here tonight, come on out. And sometimes we got as many as 120, 130 people, and we were able to tell our stories and share how God had, again, impacted our lives, but really how it was possible for them to experience the same love and goodness of God that we did. And in other communities, we get smaller numbers than that, but it felt like, we were politicians, hope politicians, let's say. And it also felt like, I don't know if any of you have ever watched Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure if you've ever watched Lord of the Rings, but that's also what it kind of felt like. If I were to be the main character in my own movie, I would be like Frodo, and we were traveling to Mount Doom to throw the ring in the lake of fire to forever destroy and dispel darkness in Middle Earth. Like that's also what it felt like. Was we're on a mission, and we're on a mission to talk about hope and to talk about how change is possible in a climate like Nunavut. And that might offend you, that might encourage you, but I believe it's true. I believe that there will come a day in Nunavut where suicide will no longer be something that plagues my people. I was just on Facebook this week, and I do these weekly videos where I talk about different scriptures and I talk about what we're doing and just some really great reports. But I post these videos in every Nunavut community's Facebook group, and just in the last week, one guy looking at the video was a little upset, I think I ruffled his feathers the wrong way or something. I don't know. Anyway, he didn't know that I was Inuk. That's one of the things that I get the most, is people not realizing that I'm Inuk. I don't know exactly why that is. I always start out the meetings by saying, my mom was I don't think it's exactly accurate, but I say that Mom was born in an igloo, and I say that Mom, she was born on the land in the late 1950s, But you know, that's one thing, is people never really know for certain that I'm Inuk, that I my family does come from Nunavut. People almost always, I've had cousins of mine tell me that I'm First Nation, and that's one of my favorite things for people to say to me, because I mean it's just not true. And despite like, most times we get into conversations where I say 3 or 4 times, no, I am Inuk. Like, no, you're not Inuk. Like, I am. My mom comes from this community. No, you're not Inuk. So, you know, it's just a funny thing, and I don't know how to convince people, you know, that I am. When I was younger, when I was in high school, people always thought that I was Lebanese, or that I was from one of the Arab countries there. Um, I was a lot skinnier then, and maybe, you know, I had a darker skin complexion because I was outside more, and I do tan quite heavily in the summertime whenever I'm in sun. But the only thing that's really changed since I was a teenager, like I haven't gotten any taller, any shorter, but I have gained some weight. Right, back in the high school days, I was about 140 pounds. Now, you know, after rugby, I'm north of that quite a ways. But yeah, the transition from Lebanese to now native. The only real difference I can see is my overweightness, or the you know the weight that I put on. So we campaigned last year, and we talked about hope, and we talked about how God is an amazing source for change, and how in both of our lives God was the only thing that, well, one of the main things that really made a difference in our lives. In fact, the biggest difference. The other things that made differences were changing the friends that we had at the time. In my particular case, I stopped drinking with the people that I was drinking with, stopped hanging around them the way I was. I got good friends, people who believed in me, who wanted to see me make a comeback, let's say. I started seeing a counselor, and I started talking about what I was going through. You know, but all of that was inspired by moments of prayer, moments where I was just reaching out to the Lord. And one of my favorite, all-time favorite Bible stories is found in the book of Samuel. There's two books of Samuel. The first book is where you find this story, and it's about this one lady named Hannah. And I've talked about it before in our videos that we post on Facebook weekly. And this is really one of the main stories I told in every community in Nunavut, because I think it carries such a familiar thing for so many people in Nunavut. You know, it's crazy. Like some of the stats you hear of things going on in Nunavut right now. Chief among them being the highest suicide rates in the country. And so what that means is you have a lot of people who are really struggling with some things. You have a lot of people who aren't sure of maybe who they are or what they're here to do on this planet. Maybe they've got terrible living situations at home. I mean, it could be anything. But this lady Hannah, you read in the first chapter of the first book of Samuel, you read that she was married to a man. The two they loved each other, but Hannah couldn't have any children. She just wanted to be a mother to a child, and that was impossible for her. Sure, her body wouldn't produce any. Well, it just wouldn't make babies. And you know, her husband had married a second woman, and that second woman and her husband had many children. It doesn't exactly tell you how many, but even if it was one child, you know, she'd be still in the same frame of anxiety or depression or whatever it is. So Hannah, she's in this state of shame, of sadness, you know, of angst and anxiety, and she just wants to have a baby. And you know, what does she do? Well, you read in that first chapter that things are really quite awful, and you can read the story yourself, you know. But to sum it up, what she did is she She called out to the Lord one day, and she got down on her face and she said, "Lord, I want a son, and I want to know that I can have a son." And she prayed this at the sanctuary, and you know, sanctuary is kind of an old word for church. You and I would understand that as a church now. And so she's at the church and she's praying, and God answers her prayer. Well, the other thing too is she invited someone into her life to pray with her, and that person, he was a prophet. You and I would kind of understand him as a pastor, and that pastor and Hannah, they pray, they cry out to the Lord together, and interesting little piece there. After they prayed, this Eli guy in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 17, it says, Eli answered her, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you have asked of him." That is an amazing thing, really, number one, to consider. And this is what we told people all across our travels, is that when you pray and when you ask God for something, you know, like in Mark chapter 11 and verse 2, Jesus said, "Have faith in God." And there's something amazing about when you just have faith in God, when you pray something and you ask something of God, you can expect that to happen. And so here, Hannah prays with a man. That man says, "Go in peace." Like, it's already taken care of. God is so amazing that it's already taken care of. You don't even have to worry about it. And so Hannah goes off, and it says, you know, that she had relations, had relations with her husband. And later that year, sure enough, God came through. God gave her a son, and that son's name was Samuel. And the reason why we told that story all across Nunavut was because, well, for one, I think a lot of people can understand Hannah's frustration. I think a lot of people can understand what disappointment feels like, what struggle feels like, and those are really tough things sometimes. Well, they are tough times. Those are tough things to deal with. I think we all can understand what disappointment feels like. But there are cases where when we call on the name of God, and what that means is when we pray, when we say, "God, help me with this, help me with that." You know, you invite people into your life and you say, "Help me with this, help me, I need prayer. Let's put our faith together, let's pray and ask God to do something." And in Hannah's case, in my case, in Braden's case, the reality is that God moved and God answered our prayers, and here we are today. So that's what we did. We told this story all across Nunavut. We told our own stories, and if I'm being honest with you, I have to say that there is something of a hope movement starting in Nunavut, and it might seem small. It might seem like, you know, it's just a few people, or it's just 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 people believing that things can change. But it's a start. It's a trickle of, I think, what a wave will be of hope, of life improving, of things improving. And you might say, "Well, Stephen, that's just a normal, you know, discourse. That's just a normal thing that happens with societies." Nunavut is a young territory. You know, it's 1999, 20 years ago this year, is when Nunavut became its own entity, its own government, its own territory. So yes, obviously things will improve. Obviously, given everything that has happened to the Inuit people with cultural appropriation and the federal policies at the time of forced relocation, of slaughtering of the dogs, of all of the things, all the craziness that happened. Obviously, things will improve given time, and I would agree with you. But I think when you involve God in the process, I think that the quality of the change is far different than without God. I think people find peace like they haven't found peace before. I think change happens faster. And we're seeing that happen now. You know, like I mentioned it in our last podcast that Arctic Hope Project started as giving youth leadership development courses in Cape Dorset. And we chose Cape Dorset because in 2014, September 2014, there was an 11-year-old boy who took his life. And how crazy of a thing that is that that happened. But more than that, it was the spark really that Bill Prankern and I and Becky, my wife, all sat down together and we said, we have to change our approach. We have to change something here. We have to reach a generation that is facing things that Inuit culture has never faced before. And that being, this strange thing where so many people, so many young people, so many men and women, are just enticed almost with suicide. And so we started out by giving youth conferences and youth leadership development courses where we'd bring in my mom. Mom was supposed to be on the podcast today, actually, but just some family stuff is going on. We've there's been a couple little things, well, some pretty major things actually. I don't really need to get into details about it, but it's enough to say that if you're watching this, pray for my mom and pray for the family. We need it, first of all. It's crazy, what happens in life, but Mom was supposed to be here, and she was going to share. We'll have her come up at some point because she's been so vital in all of the things that we've been doing in Nunavut. She co-founded Canada's only Inuit-specific trauma and addictions treatment center, the Mummisavik Healing Center. And Mummisavik, that means healing. That means heart. And specifically, it's healing. And so Mom started this whole center that housed, that brought in close to, I think it was about 4,000 clients over the course of its 17 or 18 years in operation. And it was trauma first, trauma treatment first, as a means of dealing with addiction. And I worked there for 4 cycles, which is about a year. Absolutely loved it, loved what they were doing, believed in it because I'd gone through a similar thing of healing that many of these people were on. And so Mom's going to be on the podcast at some point. We'll get her in. And you'll love to hear her story. She's amazing. I often say that even if she wasn't my own mother, I would still have her come with us because she is one of the most qualified people I know of. Not only speaks Inuktitut, she is an Inuk. I'm not exactly sure when someone becomes an elder, but she's pretty close to being an Inuk elder. Many people regard her as an elder, but she carries such a grace and humility that is really quite amazing to see. And I know you're going to love her on the podcast, just to hear her story and kind of what she's gone through. But so Mom was going to be here. But we started out in Cape Dorset by giving these leadership development courses. And Mom would come in and she would sit down with as many as 10 young people, talk to them about trauma and what healthy relationships are, and really it was quite basic in its approach of just trying to help some of these young people identify what's going on in their lives. And then we had one of the founding fathers of the territory of Nunavut, also happens to be a family member of mine, and you'll discover that Nunavut, it's a small population, which means that it's even smaller amount of Inuit in these different communities. It's in around 35,000 people, I think it is, the population. But then, given everyone who's not from Nunavut living there, working there, I'm not exactly sure how many Inuit actually live there, but it's less than 35,000 people. And so we have Tugak Curley. Tagak Curley is one of the founding fathers of the territory of Nunavut, and he would do the leadership development component of our course, and that's what the Arctic Hope Project started out as a means of helping some of these teenagers identify what some of the things that they're dealing with is, and also reinforcing their potential, their leadership potential in their community and really in their own lives. So that's how we started out. And Cape Dorset is a beautiful place. The people who live there are phenomenal. They lovely, lovely people. I've got some family members there. But that's where we started, in Cape Dorset. And we then felt that it was a good time to bring this same program to Mum's hometown community called Pangertung, and it's on Baffin Island. Both these communities are on Baffin Island. But that's how we started out, was just small groups of teenagers helping them see, a way through the darkness, let's say, a way through the things that they're dealing with. And then, yeah, I felt in May of 2017 to tour all of Nunavut to talk about hope. Talk about how change is possible, how things in our lives, they don't stop, or they shouldn't stop after the most traumatic experience. Because we're far more resilient than we know. And I think that's what I want, is one of the things I want to say to you today, is that you are far stronger than you know. And part of that strength, obviously, is found in allowing other people into our lives to walk with us, to hold our hands up, whatever way you want to look at it. People need to be a part of our lives, but you are far stronger than you know. So we traveled all across Nunavut, and what was it? In February, Braden and I traveled to Hall Beach and Qikiqtarjuaq. They were great trips. Honestly, it was a quick trip. We were there and back in less than 2 days. Sorry, less than 3 days. Flew up on a Monday into Hall Beach and then down to Qikiqtarjuaq, and then we were home on Wednesday. Braden got very, very sick in Qikiqtarjuaq, Broughton Island, as it's formerly known. So sick, really, that I had to leave him in Iqaluit, and I felt bad, but at the same time, I didn't feel bad at all, because I wanted to get home and I wanted to see my family. But when it was great. We had about 200 people between our two meetings. In Hall Beach, it was about 120, maybe 130 people out at the community center. We gave away an iPod, and we talked about hope, and it was a great response from the people there. And then in Qikiqtarjuaq, smaller community. Hall Beach, by the way, is about 800, maybe 900. So we had as many as 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 people out at our meeting, hearing our stories of hope and how God has really impacted our lives, and that's amazing. We then went to Qikiqtarjuaq, and we talked about same thing, and we had just under 100 people, and that community is about 400. So Hall Beach and Qikiqtarjuaq are two communities we didn't make it to last year. On Monday, March 4th, we fly to Whale Cove. That was one community, again, that we didn't make it to. And then next Tuesday, these are great times to be traveling. And the Arctic Hope Tour, 21 of 25 last year. In February, we made it to 2 more, so now we're at 23 communities. And then next week we'll be at, we'll be at 24 and 25. So I want to say the Arctic Hope Tour, is done, but really at the very, 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 very top of Canada, there's a community called Grise Fiord, and there's about 200 people that live there. It is the most northern community in this country, and it's right at the very, very top. It's an Inuit community. Later on in the year, we'll talk to one young lady whose family is from Grise Fiord, she'll tell you the history of this community, because it's really quite something. But we've got to go there at some point this year. We made it to Resolute Bay, which is just south of that community, and anyway, you know, hope. Hope is an amazing thing. Hope, I love hope. I love what it does for us. I love that hope, if we're able to hold on to it, if we're able to look at it, it starts to grow in our hearts. It starts to grow in our lives. And in doing so, I think our lives are forever changed, because how amazing of a contagious thing hope is. And I know hope is available for you. I know hope is available for your family, and really, you know, we have great days ahead of us. And that's an easy thing to say, because, you know, how do you know what the future holds? You know what the future holds in some regard, because you still have potential. And potential is not something that you can really measure or weigh. You just know that potential is there for you, that you could be living a better life, that you could be doing things differently. And 100%, God is someone that is able to get us there. And so really, you know, just an encouragement that the same thing that happened to Hannah, of calling out to the Lord, of asking God for help, of asking, you know, this particular man, Eli, to pray with her, you know, that's the moment, I think, that where things changed in her life. And honestly, if you read down in verse 21 of chapter 2, right, in chapter 1, we read that, or we heard rather, that she had a son, and it was this whole big thing that God answered her prayer, that the impossible that was impossible to her, God made a way and had a baby. In chapter 2, in verse 21, it says that God was most especially kind to Hannah. She had 3 more sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel stayed and grew up with God. So there's an element of God when you partner with Him, when you call on His name, when you believe that God has something for you, because He does. That's just a beautiful thing. He does have something for you. And Hannah, you know, the story here is that God not only answered her prayer with a son, but that God gave her more than she knew was possible for her. And as much as that is a story in the Bible, what it is something that you and I can look at, and we can say that God has more for you, more for me, in our lives than we ever could think of. Like the impossible things that you and I would look at and say, well, that 100% is impossible. There's no way that's ever going to happen. Hannah here, her story, right, God's story to you and I, is that it is God's desire. It's His plan to give us more than we ever knew was possible. And with that said, look, I'm so excited for you. I know that this is the best day. And the days ahead are the best days of your life. I love you. Some of you I might not even met before, but I love you. I know that your life is not what it should be now, but it will be one day, and that day is coming soon. Love you, and we'll see you next month.